And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us tonight. We've got some very special guests on the episode. We have Charlie Wooten, NF4A, down in Panama City, Florida. Avid DXer, very active, been around, helped out with the WRTC, and he's also a broadcast engineer for iHeartMedia down there. And we're going to also have our normal guy, Mark, N4UFP, section manager for the South Carolina section, good friend of mine. And so what do you say? Let's get to it. Welcome in, everybody. We're talking about Ham Shack accessories. I know Mark and I were actually talking on the phone, I think it was yesterday, a couple things that actually pay for themselves just by buying. And Charlie, this morning I got up, I was drinking my coffee. I said, you know, Charlie's been around a long time. He's a big DXer, big contester. And I said, I bet he has some good tips. So that's why we brought you guys along. Mark, welcome in. What are you drinking tonight?
I'm going to take it easy. This is Vino Verde. It's Portuguese white wine, low alcohol content. That means I'll probably still be in the same position 45 minutes from now. That's a good thing.
It's a lot different from last night, right? Mr. Wooten, Charles T. Wooten, NF4A. Good evening, sir. What do you have for your adult beverage this evening?
Oh, I have here a tall boy. They're very rare, by the way. Pilsner Urquell from the Czech Republic. Excellent beer.
You spent a fair amount of time over in that part of the world, haven't you?
Yeah, back in the early 90s, right after the fall of communism, I was doing contract engineering work. You know what I'm talking about. I was in Tallahassee. I had traveled over to Tallahassee, was doing some work at a station, and going to lunch. And my pager, this is back when we just had pagers. We didn't have cell phones in this part of the country back then. My pager goes off. It's a 202 area code. So I go over to a phone and use my AT&T credit card, you know, like you had to on the pay phones back then, and called it. And it was a gentleman from the U.S. State Department asking me if I would be interested in going to then what was called Czechoslovakia and put on a series of radio stations that they were going to fund, so that they would have something besides state-owned radio and television on the air in Czechoslovakia. So I ended up going over there, and on my very first trip, there were three of us. We flew into the Prague airport. It's very drab, communist. Back then, everything was gray or beige or whatever. And over in the corner, three little enterprising dudes had set up a bar. And so we had to we were going to change planes, and we were going to Bratislava, which is now the capital of Slovakia. But back then it was all one country. But that's where our first place to be was in Bratislava. So we had a couple of hours there. So we went over and we got us a liter of Pilsner Urquell on tap. And we asked how much it was, and it was the equivalent of 22.5 cents for a liter of probably some of the best beer in the world.
But now, when you heard that price, did you not have high expectations for that?
Well, I had the beer before, but just on rare occasions, and it was like, you know, like you get it in a restaurant on tap, and it's like $5.95 for a little small, you know, what we call a glass of beer here. Right. And so for 22.5 cents, I got a liter. That's a lot. So we imbibed on several of those while we were waiting for our Czech airline, which was called OK Airlines, Oscar Kilo, which is, you know, the prefix for Czechoslovakia and for the Czech Republic now, for our flight to Bratislava. So that's the reason I have fallen in love with Pilsner Urquell. But I also ended up doing some work in Croatia, and I have another favorite beer there. It's called Karlovačka, and it's a very good beer too. In fact, it's better than Pilsner Urquell. But The Pilsner Kettle you can get here, but the Karlovačka you can't get here.
Well, you've spent a lot of time in Croatia, right?
A lot of time. I go there every year, as a matter of fact. I go there and operate with 9A, 1A at their big contest station.
Did you go this year?
Yeah, I was there. I was there for the ARRL sideband contest. I go there every year for the ARRL sideband.
And you spent, was it a couple of stints as an official with the WRTC in that contest?
I have done 3 referees now of WRTC. One in Brazil in 2006, and then in 2014 in New England, and then 2018 in Germany. And hopefully in 2022, I'll do one in Italy if we have this COVID crap finished by then.
I know. This shit, I swear to God, I think we're all tired of it. We just want to get it over with. Let's get back to some kind of normal. I was actually looking at numbers today, and the curves, at least for our county, the state, and the country, it looks like it's kind of plateauing. So maybe we're starting to see something, but we don't want to talk too much about that because everybody's sick and tired of hearing it.
That's
agreed.
Everything but that. Let's talk about anything but that.
Well, we're going to talk about Ham Shack accessories. Like I said, Mark and I were on the phone. I think it was, was it last night or was it? Yeah.
It was last night.
Last night, talking about things that would actually pay for itself. And we came up with remote coax switches. I'm like, we got to talking like, if you got a couple 100-foot run of using like LMR 400 or some good quality coax, you can pay for a remote coax switch pretty darn quick if you got a couple of antennas.
Yeah, sure can. I had one here when I had my beam, and I had a TA33 with the workband elements on it for 12 and 17. And then I had wires for 80 and 40, and I had one of those Ameritron remote switches at the base of my tower.
That's what I got.
Go ahead.
So yeah, that's the same thing I got.
Yeah. And of course, when you put one of those in, you coil a little bit of the coax up to choke it before you plug it in so that you have a little bit of a lightning choke there before you go into the switch. Helps a little bit on each one of the inputs.
Right.
But now, since Hurricane Michael destroyed all that, and I now have a crank up US Towers HDX 555 crank up tower with a step IR beam on it that covers 40 through 10, I no longer need the remote switch.
If you have an antenna that will take care of the majority of, if you 10 through at least 40, that really does cut down on the amount of antennas that you need.
Yeah. I've got to get a wire up for 80, but it's summertime, and it's just not on the top of my list. My tower guy, Dan K1TO, is supposed to come through here, and he's going to install a pulley up on the top of the tower and with some rope on it. Then I can do the rest of it. He's going to replace my my rotor. I've got a tail twister rotor that's I actually got a loaner up there right now because my tail twister, when I first put it in, it was brand new and it took a dump. And so
that's a hard dump, isn't it? That hurts.
It was, because it was the weekend before the Florida QSO party, and I was one of the 1x1s in the Florida QSO party. So Dan hauled ass up here with another tail twister from N4TB, who rebuilds them, and put me a rotor up there to use for the contest. And he's going to come back with my rotor now that it's been repaired, put it up there, and while he's up there doing that, he's going to put me an 80-meter wire up there, and or a rope to where I can put an 80-meter wire up.
It's good to have good friends like that, isn't it?
Well, I mean, Dan does this for a living. Dan he has a A1 tower service. He does nothing but tower work for hams. That's all he does. He doesn't do two-way work or broadcast work or anything. He does ham work on ham towers and does a great job.
You don't find many of those that just do that. I think there's probably him and maybe Don Davzo.
There's one out west, KC. Is it KC7V? I forget what his call sign is, but there's a 7 out there that does some work. There's a couple of them around. Yeah.
Well, Mark, what your experience? You've been a ham a long time, also.
Well,
Accessories, people that it really just makes things a lot easier, and it really isn't terribly cost effective. We got John that made a comment. The Grecon, the clock, especially since they came out with the 4K version, which is a lot cheaper than that $1,200 clock.
Oh yeah,
having something that keeps accurate time pays dividends. And nowadays there are, Windows and Mac-based apps that'll sync all your apps for you. You don't have to worry too much about time. I'm also a guy that's a big believer in coax switches for a little different reason. I've been very active on the VHF and UHF bands for a number of years, and I've got a Christmas tree on top of my tower. I've got 6 during contest season, 6.2, 222, 432, and for a while, 1296. And it was really handy to have a pair of coax switches, one on the tower and one outside the window of the shack. And that way I could switch both of them, synchronize them, switch them both, and use one piece of 7/8 hardline to feed all those antennas. All I had to do was turn the switch and go from 6 to 2. And typically in a VHF contest, you get somebody on 6, you're going to work them on 6, 2, 222, keep going until you just can't hear them anymore. And particularly in my case, I've got a fold over tower with a winch that pulls it up. The weight of, say, 5 lengths of 7/8 hardline would have been a problem. Having one piece of 7/8 and then the switches at each end really made things a lot better. Something else that I think most stations have now, and it's something that pays for itself, particularly if you don't have a lot of space, is to have a good automatic antenna tuner, because that means you can get more bands out of a single wire. It used to be. I'm thinking of it. I think years ago when I bought this house, I bought the spare lot next to it, so I'd have a place to put all the antennas. And the big one's still over there, the big 550-foot vertical loop. But I've been able to cut down a lot by using the ZS6B KW. You got a ladder line feed. Having an automatic matchbox, if you're in a place where you don't have a lot of space, that will pay for itself. You will, if you haven't got it, you may not be able to make some contacts. And they used to be expensive. They are not expensive anymore. They're relatively inexpensive.
Until I got the stepper, which I can tune to anything. I have a tuner also that I would use mainly on 80 meters to go from CW to phone. Yeah. And I'll still have to use that tuner for that, because if you want to if you want to be able to make your amplifier happy during a contest when you're running full tilt boogie, you want a low SWR, and they don't make an antenna that I know of on 80 meters that will work the whole band. They have now these beams. There's some beams that you can buy that have a relay that go from CW to phone, but I'm just talking about wire antenna or vertical. That there is no such thing that I know of as a broadband antenna for 80 meters. Now I could be wrong about that, but I don't think so.
I don't think you're wrong about it. I think you're very correct. So 80 and even 160.
Oh yeah, even more than 160.
Right, and I bought, when Mark got his KPA 1500s, because it's got the built-in tuner in it. He didn't no longer, after a couple of months of trying it out, he says, "Yeah, I don't really need this external tuner. It's the MFJ. I forget the model number. Mark, you probably remember." He sold it to me, and I mounted it actually at the base of the tower. So another thing that gives you is a ground point before your coax enters into your house. If your tower is close to your house, but you really want a ground point. Mm-hmm. And Charlie, I'm sure you agree with me on this, before it enters the dwelling, because you want to bleed all that off as quick as you can, and you don't want it running inside. And I noticed when I did that, just that, it even changed the characteristics of the matching on all the other antennas as well, because I have a good solid ground out there. It's grounded to the tower, and then that runs over to a ground rod, or some people have a couple of ground rods. But
yeah, down here we have some of the lowest conductivity in the country. If Brad, you're familiar with the FCC map for AM ground conductivity, ours is 0.25. So
you would think, being that close to salt water, it would be a lot higher.
It goes high when you're standing in the salt water, but you get literally a quarter mile away from there, and it goes to 0.25. It's terrible, and it's terrible to get a good ground here. If you can get a 10 ohm ground here, you'd rejoice.
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean it's hard to do. You have to drive, and you have to add, and you have to add, and you have to CAD weld, and you have to to get down to. And if you can get 10 ohms, that you've done wonderful. It's typically going to be 25 ohms.
Wow.
Down here.
We can talk about RF grounds. That can be a whole nother episode.
Yeah.
But you definitely want to do whatever you can to bleed that off before it enters the house, because you don't want all that running around in there.
Yeah.
But I noticed that, and then just the space you gain. Mark, talking about the automatic tuner, especially a remote automatic tuner.
Yeah.
Just the space you gain back on the desk is oh my God. I had one of those Ameritron 3 kilowatt. I forget what it was. ATR 30. Was that the model number of it?
Yeah, maybe.
I had one of those, and mostly because when you're running the amp, like you said, Charlie, you want a good match, because you want to keep that happy. Nobody wants to buy tubes these days, but just the convenience of that. It's automatic, and it just takes a few seconds for it to. I mean, if it's already been there before, it has the memory. It'll just go straight to it. Or if you need to match it, you cycle the power, which is easy enough. But I have found the remote coax switch and a remote automatic tuner is probably two of the best purchases I ever made. And you can find those used at really good prices.
Yeah. If you think about it, the remote matchbox allows you to get more out of a given antenna, particularly wire antennas. Verticals kind of are what they are. I don't have as bad a ground as they have in Florida, but South Carolina, the upstate of South Carolina, I think the ground conductivity, it's higher. It's about 2 to 3, so it's a lot better than Florida, but it's typically not what people expect from good pastoral ground. I think that would be probably 5 or 6. So I've got a vertical for 80 meters, and I spent a lot of time on the ground putting wires in. I think I'm up to 48 now, and probably still have 8 or 9 ohms of ground resistance, and that's just as good as it gets. I'm not putting any more wire in. I don't need the kind of ground you'd need at a typical AM station, but I definitely needed more than 4 wires. It'll be interesting. I own some property on a tidal creek off the coast of South Carolina, and the property abuts the tidal creek, and I haven't had a chance to do much with verticals down there yet, but it'll be interesting to see if I'm close enough to the salt water to have reasonably good ground conductivity. My fear is the ground conductivity will be a crappy at the surface, but 8 or 10 feet underneath, where the salt water starts to fill the water table, the ground conductivity would be great.
You're probably right. Yeah.
We'll have to see what happens.
Well, I know we've even got well diggers in to run ground rods.
Yeah.
For that, just to do what you can. Now, John has a comment here. John, again, John NJ4Z, good friend of the show and of us. Just backtracking a little bit, says, who makes a good coax switch for UHF and VHF?
Yeah, I was going to say something about that, because you don't want to use, I don't think you want to use the Ameritron for 432, or you need something a little bit better for above 6. I guess you could use it on 6, but That's
That'd
probably
be
pushing it. That'd be pushing it.
It would be in a pinch. I've been able to get the Ameritron to work on 2 meters. But above that, it's dicey. The company
You
that
get
makes
it to work, but it's the insertion loss you've got because of the way it's wired and everything. Yeah.
I didn't say it would work well, but it would work in a pinch.
Yeah.
You
In
could
a
make
pinch.
it happen.
Yeah.
The ones that I found were best are from a German company, SSB Elektronik. There's a guy in Pennsylvania that's the distributor. It's a 4-position coax switch, and so I've got 6, 2, 222, and 432 on it, and it has low insertion loss up to 1,000 megahertz. That's
impressive.
Yeah. And I had
that's not just open frame relays for that. What's the power rating on it?
a power rating is I think it's 800 watts,
It's pretty good.
which is I think it's it might be I think it might be a kilowatt, because I run under poor conditions on 6 meters, and there's been plenty of that in the past week or so. I might run a kilowatt on FT8, and I don't have any problems with the switch. 432, I run 100 watts, 2 meters, depending on what's here in the shack, maybe 500 or 600 watts. Lately, I've been down to 100. Never had any problem with it. The only thing that's ever happened, one of them ate some lightning, and it happened.
That happened. Yeah, you can't do anything about that.
Nope.
No.
But other than that, I've had good luck, and the Germans have a different way of looking at things, and the way it's wired is clever.
Over engineering?
Well, sometimes yes, sometimes yes.
Usually in the car division, right?
Well, no, the Germans can over-engineer a lot of different things, but in this case, it was actually pretty clever. The way the coax switch is set up, if no power is applied, it defaults to 6 meters. Well, that's really handy, because that means instead of running 4-wire cable, you only have to run 3 and a ground instead of 4 and a ground, because 6 meters is the default when there's no power applied, and then you go, to the other 3 positions. So that saves you a little bit of wire. That made it a little bit simpler to wire up.
So do they label the ports on them or like recommendations?
They're just 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Okay, but the default would be like 1, and you just run 6 meters. Okay,
ran 6 meters through that.
I think that's a nice, we'll call it a feature, right? To where you don't have to power up to use, where it would default on something, and that is where the Ameritron coax switch does fall a little bit. There you go. And John says thank you.
One of the things that Mark mentioned a while ago about timing, I just changed out my shack computer. I bought one from one of these off-lease computer companies. I'm sure, Brad, you get the emails every day from these companies where they've got all these computers for sale. Most of them are in Texas. I've got a fairly good deal on a fairly new HP, and had Windows 10 Professional on it, the whole 9 yards. My other one had 7 on it, and was getting a little bit old and slow. And so I put this computer in, and I was having a hell of a time keeping the friggin' time good for FT8. I had a friend in Tallahassee that would send me an email, "Hey, you're 1.9 seconds off." Now that's a lot of people.
Did you tell him to bite your ass?
No, because that's important when you're running FT8.
Yeah,
that's very important. So a friend of mine who also works for iHeart, who's a ham, AB4GE, Warren Davis. He's one of the IT guys, a regional IT guy. I was talking to him about it, and he showed me a program that's free on the net, and I put it on, and it's called Net Time. And when I put that on there, and I'm on the nut, and now it's perfect.
That's the one I found. That's the one I told Mark about, and it it will actually check. You can set it like I think mine checks about every 15 minutes.
Yeah, but if you can't ask it to check for less than every 15 minutes without doing something, it comes up with some message about a server or something. So every 15 minutes is adequate.
It should be, right?
Yeah. But I was having a hell of a time for a while keeping my my computer in a reasonable time frame for FT8. And when I would turn it on, sometimes it'd be 1.8, 1.9 seconds ahead. It was always ahead. The error was always ahead of time. And so I've tried to use Dimension 4, which is another program. And I stopped the Windows Time Sync service in the control panel and to use it, but it just wouldn't take care of the problem. And so finally, when I was talking to Warren, he told me about this program called NetTime, and ever since then, everything's been right. And so that's something. If you're going to operate FT8 or FT4, you've got to have your timing within a couple of tenths of a second, or you're going to chop off the end of your transmission, or you're not going to hear the other guy's transmission. And it could be the most important. Hell, in the last 2 weeks, I got Alaska on 6 meters for work. That was my worked all states. I needed Alaska.
Damn! And congratulations.
And it's hard as hell to get Alaska on 6 meters from this part of the country. I had gotten Hawaii about a month ago, and of course this.
Now you worked a couple of JAs.
I worked about 30 JAs this summer.
Oh, sick.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you're, but the thing of it is you have to come home in the afternoon about 22:30, 2300 Zulu, sit your ass in the chair and watch the screen. You got to watch the screen because it ain't going to last long. Yep. And all of a sudden you'll be seeing a 6 or an M7 or something, and then all of a sudden JA7 QVI or JE1 BMJ or one of the big JAs will come blowing through, and then that gets your attention. Those two guys have big antennas and run big power. And once they come through, and then if you listen really carefully and you got your antenna from here, it's 326 degrees. I know that's where I got a point. And it'll start at the top of Japan, and it'll work its way all the way down to the bottom of Japan. And it'll take it about 30 minutes maybe, or sometimes quicker. Some days you only get part of the JAs. The other days you get the whole island in a period of time. Some days you only get the bottom end of the island. Sometimes you only get the middle end of the island. And some days you don't hear a damn thing. But it's only in the summertime. And this year it started early. I don't know if you were on, Mark, but we had a couple of JA openings in May this year.
We did.
And there was one afternoon where my screen was completely red with JAs calling me. I mean, completely red on the FT8 program. I worked 21 JAs that afternoon.
That's nuts.
That is absolutely batshit nuts, is what that is. I mean, it was amazing.
It has been kind of a roller coaster for Sporadic E.
Yeah.
June was crazy. I'm working from home right now because of COVID, and I'm working in my ham station. So when I come in the morning, I just, fire up JT8, turn on the 6 meter gear and get everything set up. And then just while I'm working, watch the screen.
And you have it pointed to Europe during the morning.
Yep. In the mornings, I'll be at a beam heading of about 45.
Right.
In the afternoon, 322 or so, somewhere between 320 and 330. And I must have been on the edge of that thing because I saw some of those JAs. They were really light here, minus 24, minus 26.
Yeah.
The one that broke my heart, I have not worked all states. I'm missing a KH6 and a KL7. And there were several afternoons where I saw KL7 SB and folks on the West Coast and some zeros were working the hell out of them. And I just, once in a while I'd get copy on them, but not enough to make a contact.
Yeah. Yeah. The afternoon that SB was coming in here, it took me about 3 calls to get him. I just happened to be in what they call the spotlight there for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And the guys in Tallahassee, 80 miles away, couldn't hear him.
Yeah.
The guy in Crestview, which is about 40 or 50 air miles from here to the west, he couldn't hear him, but I could hear him, and I worked him. And it was amazing. And the same thing goes for Europe. I worked a couple of Ukrainians this year on 6 meters in the morning, and it was even more fleeting than the JAs. They're only in for hell, maybe
5,
2
10
minutes. I mean, you may not even have enough time to make a QSO. You may copy him calling CQ, but by the time you respond, the band has changed. But that's one of the things about we're talking about timing. That you got to get your time. If you're going to get on FT8, you got to make sure you got your time is right. And there's a website you can go to. It tells you the exact time. I think it's called time.is, and it gives you a big thing, and it tells you what your error is. Let me turn around and just make sure that's what it is, because I don't want to give you the wrong information.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of those. I know we
it's time.is, India Sierra, and it gives you a clock, and then up at the top of the screen it will give you what your error is. Right now mine says my time is exact. Actually, right. It's 0.012 seconds off. So
it's exact, or as what we call dead balls accurate.
Yeah, right.
So John also commented he looked up those coax switches, just following back up. 1500 watt max on those SSBE switches. That's impressive up to a gig.
Yeah.
They're now, like everything else the Germans make, you're going to pay slightly more than average for it, but it comes with a lot of performance. And the way I looked at it, I was going to buy a pair of those hopefully one time and get them installed and not have to mess with it. And that's, other than the lightning strike, that's been the case. They don't give a lot of trouble.
Are they 8 or 4? They're 4 ports.
Yep, you got an input and 4 outputs.
Yeah, so I mean, you got 3 spares, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Why not?
Well, in a sense, right now the only VHF band I'm really spending a lot of time on is 6 meters. I've been wound up in this Fred Fish thing, and I don't know if I may or may not make it before we have to move, but I'm going to give it a shot. We'll see.
I'm glad you brought that up. How many? What are you at on Fred Fish, and how many are you shy?
Well, with Fred Fish, you can have a bunch and still be shy a bunch, and that's kind of where I am right now. Last time I looked, I think I had 395.
What's the magic number? 488.
488. So
yeah.
I have a lot, and I still got a long ways to go.
That's like I did the county hunting thing back in the late 80s and early 90s because I was mobile a lot, and I had a kilowatt mobile.
Oh, wow.
And that's where I used to get. That's how I got. By the way, Brad, that's how I got to know the guys on 3898.
Oh yeah, I've heard the stories. Buddy tells me the stories all the time. And I'll tell you another thing here in a second. But go ahead.
But I was into county hunting because during the day when I was traveling, I'd go through all kinds of places where people needed a county, and I had a Texas bug catcher, and I had built a 1 kilowatt mobile amplifier out of a Motorola applications note. And there was a company out of Ohio that was building they would furnish you the items, individual power dividers and the splitter. You use the same thing for the splitter that you use for the combiner,
right?
And you had four MRF 454s, I think. They were a 12-volt transistor, and you had 4 boards with a pair of those on them, so there were 8. and then it combined them. You split the input, and then you combine the output. And of course, there was no bandpass filter, but your antenna is your bandpass filter when you're mobile.
Right.
And I mean, because it's because of the nature of a mobile antenna, it's only going to pass the frequency it's resonate, resonant on. So that there, it didn't have the filtering that it should have had, and it wouldn't have probably passed FCC. Well, back then they had type acceptance, but now they don't. But it certainly wouldn't be a type approved amplifier. But because I wasn't using it on a fixed station, I was using it on a mobile antenna, which has a very narrow bandwidth. Mm-hmm. So it was rejecting any spurs or whatever, But it got out like a mother. It really did, and that was the only way I was able to talk to the guys on 98. Because if you didn't have 20 over on 3898, you might as well turn your damn radio off.
They just didn't acknowledge you at that point.
Yeah,
if they didn't know you, you better be 40 over.
Yeah, but that's how I got to know the guys on 98, Buddy Teague and all them, that we talk about. But go ahead.
I had last weekend when I was editing the last video I published, and I just had the radio on, and it was on 20 meters. I think it was on 14200 or 14210, somewhere around in there. And I was just looking for something just to listen to while I was cutting on the video. And I heard somebody, and he said, and the ID WA4D. I said, "Oh my God, dog!" And I called Buddy. I said, "You need to get him 14200." Said the dog's on there, and they did. And they talked about 20-25 minutes. So that was I felt good. I was able to reunite some guys that probably hadn't talked in about 20 years.
Wow, yeah, the dog was there. That was a lot of fun, and we all got together at Hamfest. We used to go to Orlando, and then we would, of course, go to up to Shelby, and it was just a lot of fun back in those days. Had a big deal in Atlanta every year at the Hamfest there, and back then there were a couple of guys that were Silent Keys. Now you had the Chief that was over in Jacksonville, and you had Jimmy up in Savannah, Little Larry, and a couple other guys now that have gone. Hugh Brunson, he's passed on. AE4E. I was just that was just, those guys saved my life every night because they kept me awake when I was driving at, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning in the middle of nowhere.
Everybody except for Wilkie, right?
Yeah, well, you got to go, Wilkie's all right. You just have to get to know him.
I mean, for no rhythm, no talent, white boy and a pain in the ass, he's okay, right?
Yeah.
Mark Wilkie's somebody that had to pick his wife out of a catalog and go over to the Philippines and get her.
Yeah, got one out of Philippines. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I've been married a couple of times, and I if I think about it, I might have done better to just pick one out of a catalog the first time and save myself a lot of work.
I'm on number 3 right now too, so I know.
Are you really? I didn't know it was number 3.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, if the truth be known, it's technically number 4 because I married one of them things twice.
You married the same girl twice?
Yeah, I was a dumbass.
God damn it, Charlie.
Yeah. I should admit that on national TV, should I? Worldwide TV, the World Wide Web.
So the afternoon show at SOC, Charlie and Debbie, we were just, I'd go in and I'd talk with them. We got to talking, and they got to telling me a story about Charlie Wooten down there in Panama City, and I just said, wait till me I done. I said, I know Charlie. He said, what? I said, oh yeah. So we started calling him up every once in a while. We'll give him a hard time.
Well, my wife, Jennifer, that I'm married to right now,
right?
She hired them. She hired them in Tallahassee, and she was in radio. That's how I got to meet her. I went over there to do some engineering work, and they were a Class A FM, and they got a CP to go to a C2, and I built the C2 and ended up taking their program director.
It's a the broadcast industry is kind of it's a small, closed-in industry. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of relationships that happen from that. Wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now they frown upon that, but
yeah. Oh well.
So
they say if they can't take a joke. Yeah.
Well, I used to work with a guy, Scott. He said, "Fuck them if they couldn't take a joke."
Yeah.
That sounds like Scott. I'm thinking about things, accessories somebody might have.
Yes.
Oh yeah, we need to talk about accessories.
Well, just for a minute. The other conversation is probably better, but I figured we'll rope it in for a second.
Well, we're interleaving.
I've got a couple of little items. Of course, I was thinking about this afternoon after you called me this morning, and no, everybody's got to have an antenna analyzer, one of the little MFJ boxes.
Yep.
God, right?
I mean, that's your basic number one accessory that everybody needs, or everybody needs to have access to. You need to know somebody. Or maybe your club needs to buy one or whatever, and you can check it out and use it. Of course, you got to be careful when you use one of those things not to transmit near it. When we were on the K4M Midway Island DXpedition, we had a problem with one of our antennas, and we needed to work on it, and we needed to use the MFJ analyzer. It was called a Battle Creek Special, and this antenna does 160, 80, and 40 meters. It's a vertical, but it's got a relay box at the base of it, and then it's got a top hat and a couple of things. But we had some wires that were messed up at the top of the antenna, and that was our problem. And we had to shut down the whole DXpedition. Everybody had to quit transmitting so that we could use the MFJ analyzer to troubleshoot the antenna. So there were six stations on the air. This was during the day when we weren't even using 80, 40, and 160, but we had to have everybody shut down, because if you don't, you'll blow up the front end of that MFJ. So you don't want to be, you don't want to be transmitting on an adjacent band or on any band within half a mile of one of those things. I would say. I mean,
half a mile.
I mean, I've heard they're pretty sensitive. I wouldn't, a kilowatt and a half mile, quite a bit of RF,
And I think that half mile might be an underestimate. My experience was a little different. I've got a big loop here, vertical loop for 160 meters. The vertical sides are about 80 feet, and the horizontal legs are each about 190 feet. The bottom's about 10 feet off the ground. And we were in the 160 meter contest a few years ago, and we were the sideband contest. We were having a little trouble with it, and when I set everything up, it was during the day, and it was easy. I just plugged in the MFJ and everything worked fine. What I failed to consider was that Rock Hill at the time had one radio station on a graveyard channel, 1 kilowatt daytime non-directional, 250 watts night. And the transmitter's probably 5 or 6 miles east of my QTH. Yeah. It wasn't really a problem. Well, then after dark, we had some issues, and I went out back and hooked up an MFJ to that vertical loop, and you couldn't measure the SWR or impedance of anything because all the skywave signals were coming in, and it just completely overloaded it. And I was a little pissed. I'm thinking to myself, what the hell happened? And then I realized this thing has a receiver, and I just hooked it up to an antenna that is designed specifically to capture signals down near the top of the AM band. And I'm not only getting 160 meters, I'm getting every clear channel station between 15 and probably 1700 kilohertz. It was a mess.
Well, as Brad knows, there's a piece of equipment made by Atomic Instruments that we use to measure. I think he must have an SD31. There it is. And it has that's the FIM, yeah. But there's a signal generator that they'd make for measuring using an impedance operating impedance bridge for measuring an antenna like you were doing there on your loop, but it puts out a coded pulse, and the receiver only responds to that coded pulse. So you can actually have interference and still make a measurement with one of the what we call an OIB, which is a bridge for measuring, making your antenna or the network that feeds your antenna 50J0, which is what you want on a broadcast transmitter in most cases. So that's the workaround for what you're talking about there, and that thing covers up to 5 megahertz, so it would have worked great on 160.
So John in here says, "Screw MFJ." Said you need to get a rig expert. Have you used any of the rig expert devices, Charlie or Mark?
I haven't, but I've seen them. 9A1A has one, and they work very well. Yeah, I just personally, I've got an MFJ here, but there are several out there. The rig expert. What's the other one? Comet? Is it Comet makes one?
Yes, Comet actually, they had one out. I remember when I was in Orlando, maybe 10 years ago, they were just coming out with it, and they put it in my hands just to play with, and it feels a lot better than the MFJ, but I think the price was a little high. I know Mark's got one of the Array Solutions VNAs.
Yep. I just want to see which one it is. It's the 4170, and it's great, except for one thing. It has the same Achilles heel that the MFJ does. If there are strong signals nearby, you're going to have a problem. I got active on 630 meters a couple of years ago when it first opened up, and I put up an inverted L. Now, the vertical section's probably about 90 feet, and then I got about 150 feet on the horizontal, and I was trying to get the base loading coil set up and trying to use that vector impedance analyzer, and it was kind of a pain because you've got once I got enough loading inductance down there where it wasn't really picking up anything in the AM band, things got better. But when I first started, putting the, I'd wind some turns and then check it and wind some more turns. I had a rough idea. I needed about 400 microhenries, but I wasn't sure exactly how much. It's hard to model the ground. And I found that it suffers from the same problem as the MFJ. If you've got strong signals that are being picked up by the antenna, they're going to interfere with the reading. In fact, I don't know if have you ever been over when I've been measuring something with it. As you're moving through the AM band trying to measure impedance, you'll see the graph just have these big peak spikes in it.
Signals.
Yeah, well, there's one at 730. That's that daytime station in Shelby, and 1150, that flamethrower down the road in Rock Hill. That's daytime only. No, they're not. They have 38 watts at night. Sorry.
Yeah. Whatever the fuck that means.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's how they can run their FM translator.
I don't know if they got one, Charlie. I mean, that could be a totally different thing altogether. The FM translators for AMs, and then we got one for an HD3.
I've got one on that HD2.
I mean, I'm sure that's a loophole, but
I'm fixing to have another one on an HD3. So, yeah.
But into the shortwave region with that thing, I'd be scanning, like, say, a doublet antenna, and I don't have any matching or anything, just ladder line coming in. I could see when I'd cross, like, the 49-meter shortwave band, you'd see a bunch of spikes, the 25-meter band, if during the day, maybe 19. They're really good tools to have, and they may not save you tons of money, but they'll save you tons of anxiety when you have an antenna problem, but they have limits. And as long as you stay inside the limits, you're generally going to be pretty happy.
It'll save you a lot of time.
Yep.
Well, I think just talking about the antenna analyzer, I think that's probably MFJ's best-selling product. Would you guys agree?
I bet it would be if you were to ask Martin Jew. I bet you that's what he would say.
Yeah, I mean, when they came out with that really was a total game changer when you're dicking around with antennas. No longer, you got everything you need right there. to check your antenna out. That really was a big deal when they came out with it. And I don't think anybody else had anything, especially in real time, that would do that for you.
I got a couple of other accessories. They're kind of specialized, maybe not for just everybody, but I use one here for my FT8 and interfacing my contest software and my MTTY contest ArtReady software, which I use for contesting, because it gives me a bunch of virtual COM ports to set up different things in my radio. I could even set up my rotor if I wanted to. I don't have it interfaced. And if I had an amp that had band changing on it, I could do that as well. My active antenna tuner that I have is an ACOM 1000. That's what I call it, is an active antenna tuner. I don't call it an amplifier. It's a active antenna tuner. But it's just your basic, it's got a band switch, a loading, and a tuning on it. It's not automatic. It doesn't have a tuner built into it, but it runs 160 through 6 meters. I have an alpha sitting here off camera, Alpha 78, but it doesn't cover 6 meters. It does cover 160, and it's got a little intermittent problem right now. I'm thinking about selling it and letting somebody figure out the problem. It's not in the output network or the input network. It's in the keying, and because I wanted to get an amp that covered 6 meters, I just put it over to the side. I really need to fix it. But this device that I use is I don't know if you see it, but it's right here. It's called a microkeyer. About to lose my microphone there. It's made in Slovakia, but it's available here, and it does the interfaces with the radio, with my contest logging software, it has a built-in sound card that it uses. It doesn't use your computer sound card. It has its own sound card, and it generates on RTTY. It talks to the back of my ICOM 7800, and I'm not running audio frequency shift keying. I'm running true FSK on RTTY through it.
You guys carry on. I just had a call from work. You guys carry on. I'll be right back.
Okay. All right. Oh, okay. Hope he doesn't have a transmitter off. Me and him do the same thing for a living. If that can happen sometimes.
Yeah.
We have no social life whatsoever.
Well,
our scheduled social life. But anyhow, I was just saying this device, it's really easy to set up because you buy a cable for it, for the radio that you own. Now I just happen to have sitting here this cable. This is a 30 DB39 that plugs into the back of it. This particular cable is for an ICOM 7300, which I had borrowed for a couple of weeks while my 7800 went away for some service. And all the cables are marked, and you just plug it into the back of that microkeyer, and all the cables that go to your radio, to your accessory plug on the back of your ICOM radio, to your computer, the USB cable to your computer, to your if you had an amp or whatever, it's all already, the cables are pre-made and for the radio that you have. And so it's very simple to set up, very simple to set up. And it furnishes the information to your logging program. A lot of the contests now are going to require that you, on your log that you submit, you have to log the actual frequency you are operating on. And this actually gives that information to the logging program through the information that it takes in and distributes out those various COM ports to the various devices. It's a great thing. You're on FT8, and I know you heard it a million times, Mark. But you'll have these assholes that will not have their Windows audios turned off, and you'll be sitting there on 20 meters listening to FT8, and you'll hear maybe somebody listening to an audio file, or you'll hear Windows system sounds, or you'll hear different things. And these idiots don't even know, or maybe they do know, I don't know, and they just don't know what to do to fix it. But you'll hear all this stuff going on that really, in that part of the band, is not legal. You know, you can send data, but you're not supposed to send music or talking. You know, and there's some idiot that had an adult video, the audio from an adult video on 20 meters the other day running. You know, it's that's all I'm going to say about that one. But you know, but a lot of people, but that's somebody doing it maliciously. But a lot of people just don't understand how to set up their audio properly, and one of these devices takes care of all those things in one fell swoop. You put that little router program onto your computer, and you've got drop down boxes with the type of radio you're going to use, and all the information you got, and what COM port you're going to use, and in my case, it's using the 7800. So you've got the address for the CIV interface. So I mean, after you enter that information, everything just falls into place, and it all meshes correctly. MMTTY works with it perfectly. All you do is you tell it, I'm going to use MMTTY, and here's the path to open the program. You know, and it's very simple to set up, and that's another little accessory, I guess you call it. It's a little pricey accessory. It's about $300 or $400, but it gives you independent audio and video levels for send and receive. It gives you a digital readout of your frequency. Also gives you a digital readout of what you're sending on RTTY or on CW for that matter. I don't need a code reader because I know the code pretty well. I've been a ham since I was 12 years old, and I love CW, so that's not a problem for me. But it does read CW if you're one of those. It has to have it. But it also sends. It also shows you what you're sending on CW, and it has the built-in WinKeyer, which is a USB-based keyer, electronic keyer for CW, and it's all built into that package. But there's more, as they say. If you don't want to buy that whole thing, this is a WinKeyer. This little box right here. I've had this for several years. It's got a USB jack on the back. It's got outputs for push to talk and for and you key to 2 different radios with it. It's got a speed control on the front, and it's got memory buttons on the top. I don't use them, but you could. But you can use this in conjunction with most of the well, not most, all of the popular contest logging programs like M1MM, WinKey, or WinTest, the DXlog.net from 985K, and who, by the way, is a silent key, but they're continuing to support it. There's several other contest logging programs out there. Those are the big three, really. M1MM, of course, and then WinTest, which is made by a bunch of guys in France, which is a very good program. They don't have a lot of U.S. contests in it, except for some of the ARRL stuff and the NAQP and a couple of other things, and 1 or 2 of the QSO parties. But M1MM will recognize a WinKey, a WinKeyer.
Okay.
And these are very inexpensive. I think this is like $99 or something. It's
oh heck, that's
K1EL.com, K1EchoLima.com for that little box there.
You talk about interfaces and software, something that I've found to be worth the relatively small investment. HRD, Ham Radio Deluxe.
Yeah, I tried HRD. I it's okay. I've got a friend that uses it. It loves it. I don't do a lot of non-contesting and non-DXing. All I do is DXing and contesting for the most part, and so HRD doesn't really appeal to me. If I was just a casual operator doing a lot of rack chewing and just logging contacts or doing things, I probably would use it a lot more. But all of the programs that I use already to do my contests generate those logs, keep those logs. I mean, WSJT does my ADIF log that I upload to Logbook of the World for FT8. WinTest and K1MM does the ADF or Cabrillo log for contesting that you have to submit to for various contests. So I just never have really needed HRD. Although maybe if I tried it, I would like it. I don't know.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. It's absolutely not designed for folks who are avid contesters. What I found useful about it was the control of the rigs. It was nice not to have to mess with knobs. I'm a guy that is perfectly comfortable clicking a mouse. Like you, I have logs in a lot of different places. You know, I've got all the FT8 and FT4 contacts and WSJTX and some legacy contacts from when I used to run Moonbounce. I was able to use the log in HRD to pull everything together.
Yeah.
And so for tracking things like my Fred Fish Award and some of the other stuff, it turned out to be handy. And I think if you were sort of a generalist, if you were a fairly new ham, it would be a useful addition to have, because in terms of a general log keeping function, it's probably all you need. It absolutely is not a great tool for contesting.
Yeah. I guess that's the main reason that I really never have gotten into it, because that's about 90% of what I do, or 80%, and then the other 20% is Chase DX. And I'm not at the top of the honor roll, but I am on the honor roll. But I've got 2 other countries I need, and when I finish those, I'll have it all. But he's back.
I'm back. Sorry, I didn't have a transmitter off. I had a loss of audio.
Oh,
sometimes that's a good thing.
Welcome to the fucking world of or as Al Salsi calls it, welcome to IP fucking audio.
Oh, okay. Would you have to reboot something to get it going?
I had to reboot Wide Orbit. Yeah, it came back.
Oh.
I mean, I think it's a Windows thing more than anything, but it came back up, started playing. I said, all right, good enough.
Yeah. We were talking about accessories while you were gone. I was talking about the Microham wind keyer, and also the wind keyer, standalone wind keyer. As a nice little electronic keyer to use. It's powered by your USB port.
Right.
You don't necessarily have to have a program per se on your computer, although it will interface with your contest logging program. But you can just use it to power your wind keyer, and it's got a paddle. It's got a mini jack on the back to plug your paddle into, and then it's got keying output.
I've had pretty much. I know wind keyer is a big thing. I've pretty much used between the 4 memories in the radio and hitting the F buttons with that, and then with the N1MM.
Yeah,
I've had pretty good luck with that, and that works pretty good. But the other big accessory, I think, if you're going to do contest, Heil headset.
Yeah, I've actually got some Heils. I've got the Pro 7. I've got what is this one called? This one is called the Pro Set Plus.
I've had 3 of the Pro Sets. I've sold 2 of them to Buddy.
This one, this one here is the Pro Set Plus, which has a little switch on it, which you can switch between the 4 and 5 elements. It's got both elements built into it. And you can switch back and forth. So you can go.
However, with most modern radios, I don't think that you actually need to buy the 4. You can buy the 5. You can narrow it up in the radio.
Yeah, you can. But I've had that one for years. I mean, I used it back when I had other, like the FT1000 MP, which my laptop is sitting on, so that my camera can sit right there. I've got an FT1000 MP sitting here.
You know what? A Yaesu is a good wheel chalk or laptop prop.
No. It's a good radio. I mean,
I know. We joke around and say we're friends don't let friends buy Yaesus.
Yeah.
I mean, because you got a 7850 behind you, right?
This is a 7800.
Oh, 7800. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Because Ray got a 7850.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like while you were gone, Mark was talking about he doesn't like knobs. That's the reason I have the 7800 is because I love knobs. I want to be able to turn a knob and have something happen, or push a button and have something happen. I don't want to have to go through a friggin' menu to scroll down and find how to turn something on. I just want to reach up there and say, here it is, click, there, it's done.
No, I think,
but that's the reason. That's the reason I have a 7800, and that's the reason I had before that an FT1000 MP. In fact, I had 2 FT1000 MPs. I sold one of them, but I kept one. I just keep this as a spare radio.
Well, I think all 3 of us are kind of in agreement with that. However, if you've ever played with the Flex and the Maestro, the touchscreen, it's very clean. I don't know. I'm kind of leaning towards that way on the next one, but I mean, especially with the price difference between the 7851 and the Flex.
Oh yeah.
And Mark's over there. He uses a K3. Bless his heart.
Yeah, I've got a couple of buddies that have the K3s and the amplifiers and everything, and we always I always say that when 2 guys get together and talk on the air and they both have K3s, they tell each other what serial number they have.
Well, it's because they got it on their fucking shirt.
Yeah.
Okay. For the record, I don't know what the serial number of my K3 is, and I absolutely do not have one of those.
Now, the K3, and Mark, I've told you this before. When it came out, what a brilliant idea. You had an HF radio that was scalable. I mean, you could get it in a kit form. You could add features to it. And it's a hell of a performer for what it is. It really is.
It's a great little radio.
It really is. But today, what a pain in the ass it is. I mean, he's got what do you got, a 9100 over there too that you bought from Jim?
Yeah, I got a 9100.
I'm like one USB cable, man, gives you control and your audio interface, and said, "Oh my God, how much easier can it get?"
Well, let me tell you. The only reason the 9100 isn't lit up all the time is I haven't worked out the power spiking issue yet. I gotta get the KPA 1500 set up to send an ALC voltage back to the 9100, so it won't send that full power spike for the first millisecond. And I know what I have to do, but it's like so many other things. I just haven't gotten around to it yet.
I haven't heard about that problem.
Yeah, the ICOMs, they would spike the full output for like a couple of milliseconds before when you transmit, before it hits the ALC voltage.
Uh-huh.
And that sometimes had been known to blow up some amplifiers.
Oh. Well, it blew up. I don't think you were over the day I blew up that Larkan board. I got an IPA from somebody, an IPA board.
Oh, yeah.
It was from like somebody that was like on TV channel 4 or 5.
Yeah,
and I reconfigure it as a 6-meter amp. And I had my ICOM, it might have been a 746. I don't remember. It might have been 746. But I had the ICOM set up to transmit a couple of watts. We were going to do some testing. And what I did, there were 8 MRF 151s in there.
Oh, no.
I roasted every one of them.
Oh, no.
Because the first thing that ICOM did went straight to 100 watts and then settled back down to 3 watts. And that was when I first learned about that problem. And I've seen it. It was a problem when I had an ACOM 1000 and loved that amplifier. That was the best vacuum tube amp I ever had. but my ICOM radio would drive it nuts. And I like the 9100. It's actually more sensitive than the K3 on 6 meters.
Isn't that crazy?
But until I get the cables made and get that ALC voltage applied to the ICOM, I'm not going to be able to do anything with it. There is a fix. I've used my KPA 1500 with ICOM transceivers. You just have to send an ALC voltage back that will throttle down the output power, so you don't have to worry about tripping the alarms on the KPA 1500.
Well, you bring up something interesting. I had, like I said a minute ago, I don't know if you were here when I said it or not, Brad. I had to send off my 7800, and I borrowed a 7300 from a friend of mine.
What'd you think of the 7300?
That was a pretty nice radio.
For the money, what the hell, But,
yeah. But I noticed whenever I would key on FT8 on my ACOM amp, I would see a little, on the output. And I wondered if that was just a key click or if that was actual power. It never gave me an overload, or it didn't go into overload or alarm or anything. But I wondered what that was. It doesn't do it on the 7800, but it did it on the 7300. And I wondered about that. Now you've got me wondering.
Well, I know, Mark, you've seen there's been several people that have commented about that in like the user groups and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even ICOM has acknowledged it as maybe a feature.
Yes. Yeah. The way they dealt with the customer service issue was to redefine the bug as a feature. And
like an Omnia.
Yeah, exactly. They ripped a page out of their customer service representative's book. They just said it's not a bug, it's a feature.
Yeah, we know there's 10% of clipping going on, but that's a feature. That's your 1 dB louder.
Mm-hmm. But I'll get around to it. Well, I think once the sporadic E season is over and I got some time. The K3's been a good transceiver. When I think about what I paid for it and the fun I had building it over a weekend, that was great. But this 9100 actually is more sensitive on 6 meters, and on 6 meters, sensitivity is important, and it's significant. It's probably about 5 dB.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. I've been thinking about getting a preamp for 6. On the 7800, you've got jumper cables on the back where you can insert a preamp or a device on the back.
Does it not have built-in preamps?
It does have built-in preamps. It has 2, but I'm wondering if they maybe turn those off and have a specific 6 meter preamp. I'm talking about a preamp for 6 meters now, not for the other bands, but just for 6 meters, something maybe perhaps with a lower noise figure or something.
Right. Yeah, I got you.
It really helps you 2 ways. You get the gain, but by putting the preamp out on the mast, you wind up with a lower noise figure.
Yeah, that's the other thing I was wondering about. I have to figure out, because I run a kilowatt on 6. All of the ones I've seen only talk about 100 watts or 200 watts.
I bought one from, I think it was SSB Electronic, the same people that make the coax switch, and it was rated. I don't know if it was rated 1,000 or 1,500. What I finally did, I suspect this is a much bigger problem where you are than where I am in South Carolina, but we have a lot of thunderstorms.
Oh, we have a lot of thunderstorms. We had 2 today, as a matter of fact.
We had one this evening, got a little crazy.
Yeah, it got a little weird. But what I found was, no matter how much care I took in grounding, those mast-mounted preamps had a relatively short life expectancy.
Yeah.
And so I started doing the math, looking at what would happen if I went from, say, LMR 400 to 7/8 hardline and moved the preamp into the shack where I could have more control over it. And it turned out it was kind of a wash. I had a lot less attenuation, and I wound up with a slightly worse noise figure. And maybe on 1296, I'd have had a stroke, but on 6 meters, it was something I could live with.
Yeah.
And that's what I wound up doing. and it's worked great ever since, particularly with the K3. I have nothing bad to say about the K3 except that it's just a tad deaf on 6, even with the preamp on.
Guys, I hate to interrupt. We've been at this an hour and 15 minutes. I've gotten the nasty battery indicator, so we're going to have to cut it short. I have enjoyed it. Charlie, thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to join us. This is really good, and hopefully you'll come back again.
Yeah, I did this without my pants on. I just have my underwear on.
I don't even have underwear on.
I put a shirt on. I'm not free balling, but I did put a shirt on.
And you shaved.
Yeah, and I did shave. Yeah, I needed. I had to shave. I needed to shave.
He was. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't shave either. I didn't shave at all.
I need a haircut. My hair has been this long in 100 years.
Well, yeah, mine too. My wife's been cutting my hair, which has been interesting. She's a whole lot better at it than I thought she was going to be. Now, if she could just transplant some of it and get it to grow up here so I'd have some protection from the sun, that'd be awesome.
All right, guys, I've frozen. You guys have a good night. We got to go catch the hoodle net. Charlie, thank you very much. Right. Mark, thank you. We will do it again soon.
All right.
See you guys later. Soon.
Charlie, it was a pleasure. Thanks very much.
See you later, Mark. Bye-bye.